Let's begin our editing journey at the beginning by launching the software. And the first thing that you see is the welcome screen. There are 4 tabs going across the top, and it may begin by pointing you to Getting Started, which provides you several tutorials on beginning to work with Premiere Pro. Tips and Techniques provides some further training topics, and New Features organizes the most recent educational content. But for now, we're going to head over to the Create tab. If this is the very first time that you've launched Premiere, it will bring you to a slightly different screen than this, where you can do one of 2 things, either create a new project or open one that already exists. Because I've worked in Premiere before, this is what my screen looks like, and this is what it will look like most of the time. And I can still create a new project or open an existing one. And then it also lists some recent projects that I've had open. For now, I want to show you what happens when we create a new empty project. So we'll look at what everything looks like from scratch. So I'll say New Project. And then here's a dialog box where I have to make some choices. First, I need to name the project. It's really important to name your projects intelligently. Never leave it named untitled. So I'm going to call this one Greyhound Demo. And then down here, you point to the location where you want the project file to be saved. So right now it's pointing to my desktop. If I want to change this, I just click on Browse. But I do want it to go in my Greyhound project folder within my exercise files, so I'll choose that. Now, I'm not going to mention the other options in this window for now, except for those within this tab here, Scratch Disks. It's important that you take the time to direct Premiere Pro to a location where you want to store new media. Right now, it's defaulting to save all of my new media in the same location as my project file, which I'm fine with. If you wanted to navigate to another location, though, you would just click on Browse and then navigate accordingly. I'm going to cancel here. All right, so I've got it named, I have a destination, my Scratch disks are set up accordingly, and I'm going to say OK. And now I'm inside my new empty project. This is the editing workspace, which is this particular configuration of Windows and Tools. The editing workspace is accessible by going up to Window, Workspaces, Editing, and you'll see that that's selected. So if you're on a different one, you can go ahead and select Editing. Or if your editing workspace doesn't look like this, you can choose Reset to Saved Layout, and then it should reset to look like mine. All right, so let's get a sense of what we're looking at inside of this blank project. We're going to only be in here very briefly, but then we'll load a project with media so that we have a better idea of what we're looking at. Starting down here in the lower left is the project pane or project panel. This is where we organize the contents of our entire project and access the media that we'll be editing with. There are a few tabs to the right of this, and you can access additional tabs by clicking on these arrows, okay? And we will take a look at some of these within this training. Let's move up to the upper left quadrant, and this is the source monitor, along with some other very useful tabs, some of which we'll be going into later. It's in the source monitor that we preview the material in preparation for editing, where we bring footage from our project pane up to the source monitor to mark the shots that we'll later edit into the sequence in our timeline, which is down here. The timeline provides a graphical view of the sequence, and we can have one or more sequences loaded within this timeline window. And then finally, there's the program monitor, where we see the visual output of our sequence in the timeline. And finally, I just want to show you one last thing, and that's this group of tools right here. These are the main tools that we'll use throughout the editing process. If you hover over them, you can see a tooltip telling you what each one does, as well as the associated keyboard shortcut. So we'll definitely get to most of those very soon. All right, so there's only so much that you can do in a tour of an empty project. So to get you better acquainted with everything, I thought I would load a project with media so that we have more context. So I'm going to close this, close project, and I'm back out to the welcome screen. As you can see here, the Greyhound demo is now under recent projects. But for now, I'm going to open up the Greyhounds project within the exercise files. I happen to have it under Open Recent, but you likely don't, so let's go ahead and navigate to that together. I'm going to choose Open, and then here's my exercise files, Greyhound project. I'm just going to open up Greyhounds and Open, and here we are inside of the Greyhounds project. Let's again start down here in the project pane. As I said, this is where all of the media for your project lives. It's good to be as organized as possible in your project pane so you can easily find everything you need. As you can see, I've got everything organized and labeled really well in separate bins. Here are my assets, and then I have different types of assets. And then within some of these, I have them organized even further. Right now, I'm looking at this material in list view, where I view a list of my assets. If I want, I can also look at this in icon view. I'm going to just open up my homestretch B-roll bin, and I'll do that by double-clicking. And you'll see that when I do that, it opens a floating window. So I've got list view here. If I want to switch over to icon view, I click on this button here. Okay, so list view, icon view. If I want to open this within the project pane, I can do that as well. All right, so if I don't want a floating window, I can select homestretch B-roll and then command double-click or control double-click on a PC, and you'll see that it opens up within the same window. And from there, I can switch over to icon view. All right, I want to take a look at some of the ways that we can look at our clips in icon view. And to make things a little bit easier, I want to maximize the project pane. And you can see that now I have a nice big window to look at. If I want to make the clips themselves larger, I can come over to this slider and drag to the right. And you can see that you can actually make them quite big. But I'm going to go back over to the left for now. And then as I hover over each of these, you can see that I get an indication of what's going on. I'm not clicking and dragging, I'm just hovering, and this is called hover scrub. I can also click on one of these and then press a play button, like the space bar, to play and to stop. Now, if I want to climb back out of this bin, I click up here on this button and I go back through my bin hierarchy. Then I can command double click on another bin and I'm back in icon view and I can take a look at what's inside here. All right, so I'm going to go back to my homestretch B-roll. And so I'll command double click here. And for now, I'll go back over to list view. All right, so I want to come up to the source monitor, and this again is where you preview your media for editing. So I'm just going to take a clip from my project pane, and right now it looks like I am inside of my homestretch B-roll bin. I'm going to climb back out a couple of times so that I'm at the top of the hierarchy one more time. And I'm going to load this first clip here, Allie Fetches Slow-Mo. To do that, I can either double-click on the clip or click and drag into the source monitor. Either way is fine. And now I'm seeing my clip. I can scrub through it, okay? I can use any of the play commands below the monitor. For example, play is both a play and a stop toggle. Most of the time, however, we're going to be using our keyboard. In a future movie, I'll teach you something very important called JKL navigation. For now, though, I will just call back up that spacebar command. Pressing spacebar once will play, and again, we'll stop. Now, also in the source monitor, I can mark the portion of the clip that I want to edit into the timeline. So let's go ahead and find the very first part of where we want to edit this shot into the timeline, and we want to mark an in point. On screen, this is the Mark In button, and this is the Mark Out button. Again, we want to use the keyboard, though, and this corresponds to the I key, so I'm just going to press I, and now this is my Mark In point. And I'll go forward by pressing spacebar, and I'll press spacebar again here. And now I'll mark my out point by pressing O. All right, so we know play and stop, we know mark in, we know mark out. Here's my go to in point, or shift I, and then my go to out point, shift O. So we're learning a lot of commands as we go. Okay, so I want to bring this section of this shot into my timeline, and there are quite a few ways to do this, but for now I'm just going to show you one way, which is to drag and drop this down into my empty timeline. As you can see, the portion of the clip that I marked comes to my timeline, and it's very small here, but if I want to zoom in, I can press the plus key several times, and I zoom in. If I want to zoom out, I press the minus key several times. And if I very quickly want to fit this within my timeline window, I can. I just press the backslash key. So as I scrub through here, you can see that I see the graphical indication of this clip in the timeline. I see the visual output here in the program monitor. And one other thing about making sequences is that the new sequence is stored over here in the project pane. I can go looking for it, but I think I know where it is. It's actually one level out. And here you can see that I have my new sequence. Now, it's automatically named after the first clip that I edit into that sequence. And I want to change that. Again, you want to name things intelligently. So I'm just going to single click here, and I'm going to call this Greyhound Demo 1. And a lot of times you want to organize yourself even further, for example, by putting it in my sequences bin, okay? Now, I want to load a sequence with a lot more than one clip in it, and so I'm going to just double-click on Greyhound's promo, And you can see that here is the clip that I just edited into the timeline, and here is my promo, and this will allow us to look at sequence navigation a little bit more easily. I can, of course, scrub through this. I can zoom in by pressing plus repeatedly, and I can zoom out by pressing minus repeatedly. If I want to quickly fit this within my timeline window, I press backslash. If I want to go one edit at a time, I can press my up arrow to go back and my down arrow to go forward. And then to maximize my real estate on any of my windows, we already did this in the project pane, but I can do this in my timeline as well. I just make sure that it's selected, press tilde, and now I have a nice big view for my timeline. Right now, I am seeing the audio waveform here on my A1 track, but right now I don't see it on A2. To be able to see that audio waveform, I can make my track larger by just clicking and dragging, or I can use my mouse scroll wheel. I just hover here in A2, and then I scroll up with my mouse scroll wheel to make things larger and down to make things smaller. I can do the same thing with my video. I'll just hover and scroll up, and you can see that I get a thumbnail for each of my video clips when I make them large enough. And I'm going to press tilde again to minimize. All right, so that was a lot on the user interface and navigation techniques, but now we've got a pretty good idea of what everything is in the world of Adobe Premiere Pro. So now that we have this foundation, let's go ahead and get started on learning the editing workflow.